Okay, so I wanted to make a video on my favorite house rules or variants that I've used or seen others used when playing Terraforming Mars. Yeah, I think there's lots of good stuff to do. Honestly, the game is great as it is in the rules, so that's honestly what I play the most. But some of these are fun to try out now and again. And yeah, I just wanted to add that when I came up with this, I had nothing for colonies or turmoil. It kind of speaks to me about how good those two expansions are. They're definitely the best two. I have a video about that right up there. But yeah, let's begin. So number 10, and I only have this last because it's yeah, the Stronghold games beat me to it. Shuffle Awards and Milestones. I only have a 10 because it's coming and it's basically no longer a house rule. But for anyone not paying so much attention to the Kickstarter campaign and the new components that are coming out, yeah, I think this is a great thing to do. Different combinations of milestones and awards definitely change up the game quite a bit, especially when you're used to a certain subgroup of events. Milestones and awards. So I would definitely recommend doing this. It was pretty annoying without the components. Honestly, like pieces of paper on top of milestones and award after using like a web app to shuffle them was the best way to do this. But yeah, that's coming now in the new expansion. So yeah, that's my number 10. So for number 9, I have drafting corporations and preludes. So at the beginning of the game, you're dealt 2 corporations and 4 preludes, and this is just drafting them. I personally don't like this one that much, except on certain occasions. We'll get into that soon, but yeah, it can be fun. I just really like looking at my whole hand, the 2 corporations or more. We'll talk about that soon. The 4 preludes and the 10 cards, and making up my mind. Then I don't feel like there's a good way to fit the draft in there. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that one. Number 8 is something we made up. Well, someone I play with made up. It's not we. I was kind of piggybacking there, but yeah. So basically, the idea was when you play an event, the tag stays face up until the end of that generation. And it's fun. I would definitely do this less often than more often. It's not how the game is meant to be played, but it is a fun way to give event tags a second to be useful beyond discounts. And then it basically goes back to the rules. You definitely don't want to leave them up for the whole game. I wouldn't recommend that as a house rule because it would really mess up with the balance of cards, and suddenly event tags would become a lot more powerful. But it is a nice way to have some variability, and you'll be surprised like what it can do. Like for playing AA Central and having to save up a science tag to do event to do it on the same turn or something like that. It's actually really fun. I recommend you try it at least once. And I think less than 5% of the games I've played in person, because obviously you can't do it on Steam, have been like that, but I do recommend it every now and then. Card balancing, number 7. Now this is something that I've never actually tried, but I do think I want to suggest it more often. And the thing is, so my favorite type of game is the 2 competing engines. Is what I like to call it. Usually, most games, you figure out early who's gonna have the best late game engine, and then the other player is forced to rush. Or you figure out you're rushing, and the other player is forced to, when he sees you have the better rushing game, he's forced to delay it as much as possible. And so you usually have one player rushing, one player delaying, and then in 3-player games, usually the third player decides what happens. But in 2-player games, my favorite type of game is 2-player games where the engines are close and both players, like, neither rushes, and they just try to go for like the most stupid engine ever. And the downside of that was that I figured out early playing this that whoever got a central won. Like that, there was no no way of going around it, and so it felt more random than anything else. So for cards like AI Central, I do think it's overpowered. I do think AI Central could have one or two more science stacks in the requirements. I don't feel like there's some suggestions out there in Reddit or Working Geek forums with like full rebalancing of cards. I wouldn't do it. Like the cards are not supposed to be balanced. The cards are some cards are supposed to be bad. Underground detonations is supposed to be a trap, in my opinion. Now no one goes for it anymore, so yeah, that's a fair point. But yeah, you're not you're supposed to have better cards than others. It's just that I feel AA Central is like a design error, and I could say something similar about like spin-off department, which I mean this is not a game-breaking card because most of the time I wouldn't say this breaks the game the way AS Central does, but it's still like, okay, this could cost like 3 or 4 cash more and like be like I would still play it. So they feel like more of a error in design than just a card that's supposed to be really good. So I do think card balancing in my example again is AS Central 4 or 5 science stacks to get down. But yeah, okay, number 6, Corp Fixes. So I did one video for Poseidon, I'm gonna do one for UNMI, and I think this is fun, because I think I don't see the point of having an unplayable Corp in your deck, and if you manage to add or remove a few things to make it more fun and or more like competitive, while keeping the theme and the playstyle of the corporation, I think you should do that. So check out my Poseidon video, check out the one I'm gonna do in UNMI in a couple of weeks. But yeah, definitely recommend this. And there are also suggestions on forums that you can see. Now, most of those are usually like a little more cash or a little less to pay for UNMI's ability, stuff like that, because that's the easiest way to balance a corp. I'm trying to do a video series where I find like a creative way to do it, and it's honestly been a little hard, but I have the Poseidon and the UNMI already designed and coming. Number 5, so end of game cash scoring. So cash only works as the first tiebreaker at the end of the game, and I think you could make that a little better by maybe it meaning more than just breaking the tie, but it meaning a few victory points too. So what you can do is just set on a number. I would suggest between 10 and 20, and then divide your cash at the end of the round by that number, and you get that amount of point. The reason I think it should be more than 10 is because under 10 is starting to get into like a mediocre victory point ratio. And the idea is not to like just use your cash in the last round to buy, like if your income is maybe let's say 50 or 60 total in the last round between terraforming rating and the idea is not for you to just leave the cash there and wait for endgame scoring if you don't have like you're supposed to be punished for not having something better to do with your money in the last generation. So it has to be a number that works for the cash you generate after the game ends, right? So somewhere between 10 and 20 is good. I think after more than 20 it would mean nothing most of the time, because it's rare for players to have a difference of more than 20 in income. Definitely not more than 40, so it would mean 1 point. Which is better than the half a point it means technically, which is what breaking a draw is. But if you go for more than 20, it's usually gonna mean 1 point at most, or 0. So yeah, I would settle somewhere on like maybe 12 or 13, where you can't just leave your cash lying around on the last generation. But it also means something to generate a lot more cash, like the plants, right? So it's sort of competing with the plants at the end of the game. So yeah, I think so, like 12 for 13, which is a very expensive victory point for sure, so everyone would get victory points with cards on last generation, but it could get you 2 or 3 points. 3 would be hard, but maybe 2 points if you have more cash than your opponent. Number 4, so playing with 2 corps. Yeah, so this is something that was sort of kind of done after a while with the merger Prelude, but only one player per game can get that Prelude. And yeah, I like a game where both players just play with 2 corporations, because interactions between corporations are actually quite interesting. So yeah, there's a few ways to do this. You can just both pick a corporation at the beginning, average the cash, and get that amount of cash. You can sort of do what the merger does, pick 2 corporations at the beginning, get 42, and then pay 42 cash, subtract 42 cash from your cash total. I think those are 2 great ways to do it. Or you can even put the corporation in mid-game. So let's say at Gen 3, you both do a corporation, and I mean, you can. I like what the merger Prelude does, where it just gives you three or 4 cards, and then you pick one. But yeah, you could. I'd honestly encourage to do it with more corps, because that way there's more chances that it is balanced. And there's also more chances to fight in synergy, which is ultimately why you're doing the 2 corps, they're playing with 2 corps. But yeah, I definitely think this one is fun. So that's number 4. Number 3, and this is one I've done, I think, every single game I've played of Terraforming Mars. I've played on actual tabletop, and it's just excluding some corps and adding more corps. So the excluding some corps, I haven't always done it. I started doing that with Venus once Aphrodite was released. Aphrodite was a card that I saw a spoiler and I knew immediately I don't think I ever want to use it, and I haven't yet. And then the more corps, yeah, okay, so I get that initially it's a 5-player game, up to 5-player game, and there are 12 corps, so you can't really deal more than 2. But that's super boring. I think everyone, for the most part, deals at least 3. What I used to do is just pick a subset of the ones that I wanted to play with my friends. Like, we'd each pick 5, and then we deal every single one of them. And even more so when you have a new expansion, you definitely want to try some of those, so you do like the highlight draft. But yeah, I think this is probably the best thing you can do in Terraforming Mars. And now that we have 40, I think we're up to 47 corps, then definitely, like, you don't want to deal on a 1v1, like seeing 4 corps out of 46, 47, it's criminal. So yeah, pick a subset of the ones you want and deal those, and never deal out Aphrodite, just don't. Number 2, Mega Terraforming Mars. Now I did a whole video on this, but to sum it up, you play with 2 boards. You have to terraform each parameter twice. Then you deal out like 6 corporations, like 5 preludes. You draft every round, you put all colonies in play. It's just everything, right? And it is fun. It's not something that you can do a bunch. Like, it's gonna take a long time. It's gonna take a long time just to set up. But I tried once, right? And then every now and then it's gonna be fun. And I mean, it's a thing where you can only do like engine game because it's super long, but that's my favorite kind of game, so yeah, I definitely recommend it, but more details in the video up above. And finally, and this is one that I definitely recommend playing with. You've probably seen in a few of my videos mentioning that nothing happens when you terraform Venus. So number 1 is Venus track milestones. So basically, Venus has 15 steps, so it goes from 0 to 30% in 2x2s, and at 12%, you can play a bunch of additional cards, some good ones like Maxwell Base and Stratospheric Birds. Then there's an additional milestone a little later, and then at 18%, you can play Venusian Animals. So that's still 6 steps before the end. That's the ninth step out of 15, and nothing happens other than you can get a very expensive victory point. Because all of the Venus terraformers are expensive, including the starter project is horribly priced. I don't know how it costs more than the asteroid project. And so one thing you can do is add more milestones, like put terraforming ratings, on the 21st% and on the 28th%, so that it means something, like so that you race for something, because otherwise it doesn't matter terraforming Venus at all. And that's to me a big failure of that expansion. But what I would really recommend is to add a big price at the end. And so one thing you can do is like add 3 terraforming rating at the end. But then, it's kind of silly, because you could be the guy terraforming Venus all game, and then some other guy, just because he has more tappy actions, waits you out and pays the last 3 steps, and gets 3 terraforming rating from you, or 6 total, right? So what I like to do is, if Venus reaches the end, so 30%, everyone gets a half a point for every time you terraform Venus. Right, so every time you terraform Venus, you add a cube as a resource on your corporation or whatever. Hopefully you're not playing Arclight and adding resources there, but if not, just add a different color. And so by the end of the game, by the time Venus gets fully terraformed, you'll know how many steps everyone contributed, and then you just divide that by 2, round down, and everyone gets that many points, or that many terraforming rating if you want to do a little income, but it's basically going to be points either way. And so that way there's an incentive to finish terraforming Venus, and there's also an incentive for players who haven't terraformed Venus to keep rushing the game before it gets terraformed. I think it's a lot of fun, and at the same time it balances out some of the shitty Venus cards, right? Because now like a card that is very expensive in terraforming Venus is getting you half a point more for each step, so it's 50% better. I don't think that the Venus cards are already so underpriced that making them all 50% better, I don't think makes them a lot better. And remember, I do think it's important to add the condition that you only get this if Venus gets to 30%. Otherwise, no one gets it, right? But yeah, I definitely recommend that rule with Venus. I think it makes it more balanced, and I think it makes more players go into Venus, which makes the expansion as a whole more playable when you're playing with all the expansions. Because to be honest, the times I've played Venus with all the expansion, it's like it's not there. When you play Venus just with the base game, like usually 1 or 2 players can go for it, but otherwise it's like it's not there. And so, well, yeah. That's it. That's my list of the top 10 house rules or variants. Let me know what you think, and if you have any house rules, leave a comment. And yeah, I'll see you next time.